The fluorescent lights in that hospital room were the sickly yellow of old teeth. I remember staring at them, at the faint buzz they made, the way they never quite flickered but never quite held still either, because I could not look at anything else. Not the doctor. Not the machine that had gone quiet. Not my mother-in-law, standing 3 feet to my right, her hand pressed flat against her chest, like she was performing the Pledge of Allegiance. The doctor was young, too young for this. He stood in the doorway with his clipboard held in front of him like a shield, and he said the words, the way people say words they have said too many times, quietly, carefully, with the volume turned down as if that part makes a difference. "I'm so sorry, Luna is gone." My mother-in-law made a sound I will never forget. Too loud, too precise. The kind of sound that has been shaped, even if the person making it would never admit that, even to themselves. She grabbed my arm. I felt her nails through my sleeve. I didn't cry. I didn't move. I sat in that plastic chair and looked at the small pink blanket folded in my lap, the one with the little crescent moons on it, because I'd thought that was clever once, when the world still seemed like a place where clever things could matter. I was quiet because I already knew the truth. I had known it since the moment I ran down that dark hallway 2 hours before and pushed open the nursery door. But if you want to understand all of it, everything that happened after, I have to take you back. Back to before the hospital. Back to before the nursery. Back to the woman in the floral blouse who smelled like lavender hand cream and made me feel, for the first time in my adult life, like somebody's daughter. Like and subscribe. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from, because you'll want to stay for what happens next. My name is Molly. I'm 29 years old. I'm a licensed physical therapist, and I lived in a small house outside Nashville, Tennessee, with a porch that looked over a creek and a backyard I was slowly learning not to kill. My husband Nathan coaches junior soccer on weekends and cries at certain commercials, and has never once, in all the years I have known him, said a single unkind word about his mother. Because his mother, according to him, was a saint. Her name is Judith. She spent 31 years teaching kindergarten in Clarksville, volunteered at her church's food pantry every third Saturday, kept a garden that her neighbors actually stopped to photograph, brought casseroles to people who'd had surgeries or losses. She was by every visible measure a pillar. The first time I met her, she opened the front door before I even knocked. She must have been watching the driveway. She pulled me in with both arms and held me there for a long moment, and she smelled like lavender soap and something baking, and she said warmly into my hair, "Oh, honey, I have been so looking forward to this." We sat at her kitchen table for 4 hours. She asked about growing up in Knoxville, about my job, about the house Nathan and I were saving for. She refilled my coffee without asking. She asked questions and then actually listened to the answers, nodding in the right places, remembering details from 15 minutes earlier and cycling back to them. When I mentioned almost by accident that my own mother and I were not close, that there had never been much warmth between us, that I'd grown up feeling like an inconvenience in my own home, Judith reached across the table and covered my hand with hers. "That's over now," she said. "You're ours." I drove home that evening with something loose and warm in my chest that I hadn't felt since I was a child. Maybe never. Nathan asked how it went. I said, "I think I just got a mom." He cried. Happy tears, the kind that make his eyes go red at the corners. He was so glad his 2 favorite women had found each other. She was at my 20-week scan, at my 30-week appointment, in the waiting room during 8 hours of labor, and when they finally let her in and she saw Luna for the first time, she wept in a way that looked completely real. Small, quiet tears that she didn't try to make anyone notice. "She's perfect," she whispered. She was. Luna was 7 pounds 2 ounces, dark hair, her father's stubborn set to the mouth, the most perfect thing I had ever been part of making. When Luna was 4 days old and I had already not slept in what felt like a geological era, Judith offered to take the guest room, just for the first month, just to help. Nathan gave me that hopeful, pleading look he doesn't realize he makes. I was so tired. I was so grateful. Having someone who knew what they were doing right there in the house felt like mercy from something larger than me. "Yes," I said. "Please." That was my first mistake. I made it with my whole heart. Luna had a posterior tongue tie. The pediatrician caught it at the 6-week checkup, a tight frenulum under her tongue that made nursing painful and inefficient. She was always hungry. She cried the way only a baby in genuine discomfort cries. That sustained high note that drills right into the base of your skull and doesn't release. The fix was simple. A 15-minute procedure done right in the pediatrician's office. Judith did not believe in it. "That is not a real diagnosis," she said the evening after the appointment. Her voice was pleasant, but her jaw was set. "We never had that when my children were babies. You know what we did have? Babies who learned they could not cry all night long." "The doctor showed me on the imaging," I said. "Doctors can find something wrong with anything if you look hard enough." She turned back to the kitchen counter. "Luna is fine. She's fussy. You're too soft with her and she knows it." It started that way. Small comments. A sigh when Luna would start up again just as we were sitting down to eat. A particular expression when I moved to pick her up. Patient, tired. The expression of someone enduring an inconvenience. "You'll spoil her. She's testing you." A little crying is good for their lungs. It was good enough for your husband. She was 6 weeks old. She was not testing anyone. She was hungry and in pain and she needed her mother. But I was recovering from a difficult delivery and not sleeping, and the woman who had become my second mother over 3 years was standing in my kitchen, telling me I was failing, and I was too depleted to know which voice to believe. I started to feel like a bad mother before my daughter was 2 months old. I bought the camera at Target on a Tuesday. I stood in the security aisle for 10 minutes. I picked up a Wise Cam, put it back, picked it up again. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself Judith loved Luna. I told myself this sleep deprivation was turning me into someone who suspected everyone. I bought it anyway. Something underneath the exhaustion, some older animal layer, was louder than the reasonable voice. I set it up in the nursery that night, facing the crib, tucked behind a stuffed elephant on the bookshelf. I didn't tell Nathan. I told myself it was because I didn't want to cause a fight. The truth was, I didn't want anyone to have the chance to take it down. The first 2 nights, the footage was ordinary. Judith humming, walking slow circles, nothing alarming. The third night I watched her pick Luna up from the crib when she started crying, not gently, with a sharp, impatient motion, like lifting something that had worn out her patience. She rocked the glider in quick, jerky movements that were nothing like what soothes a baby. Then she set Luna back in the crib and walked out. I showed Nathan. He watched it twice. He said she was frustrated. She hadn't hurt her. She was just tired. We were all tired. I should have said, "Take her home. This is my daughter. Something is wrong." I knew it. Some part of me knew it clearly. But I chose the quieter option. I left the camera where it was and told myself I would watch more carefully. That was the last mistake I had left to make. Luna was 7 weeks and 3 days old the night everything ended. I fed her just after 2 in the morning and put her down at 2:30. She had finally settled, her body warm and heavy, her small chest rising and falling in the even rhythm of real sleep. I stood over the crib watching her for a moment the way parents do, storing it, memorizing it without meaning to. I went back to bed. Nathan was already asleep. I woke at 3:47 to silence. Not peaceful silence, wrong silence. The kind that presses against your ears, thick and deliberate, where there should have been sound. I was out of bed before I was fully awake. Down the hall, Hart already ahead of me. Light under the nursery door, the dim glow of the small lamp we kept on. I pushed the door open. Judith was standing at the crib in her blue terry cloth robe, hands at her sides. She turned around slowly. The expression on her face wasn't guilt. It wasn't fear. It was blank, empty, like she'd been somewhere else and was only just now returning. The camera light was off. She had unplugged it from the wall. "She's quiet now," Judith said. Her voice was flat and even. She finally stopped. I pushed past her. I looked into the crib. I know there aren't adequate words for what I saw. Luna's color was wrong, not the pink of a sleeping baby, but something grayish, something belonging to things that are no longer alive. Her lips were a faint blue. There was a small white foam at the corners of her mouth. When I picked her up, her body was limp in a way that no sleeping baby's body is limp. She was not breathing. I started screaming. Nathan came running. He took one look and grabbed his phone, hand shaking so hard he nearly dropped it. Judith backed against the wall. She crossed her arms over her chest. "She wouldn't stop," she said without apology. "It went on and on. I just needed her to be quiet. I just needed 1 minute." I was on my knees on the floor breathing into my daughter's mouth. She tasted like milk and something wrong. Come back, I kept saying, Luna, Luna, come back. The paramedics came, they took over. Judith performed her grief then, wailing, sinking to her knees, I didn't mean it, over and over, for whoever was listening, she was choking. I was trying to help her breathe. I panicked. I rode in the ambulance holding Luna's hand. The numbers on the machines were all zeros, and I knew, sitting in that ambulance with Nathan somewhere behind us in the dark, that she was already gone. She had been gone before I woke up. She died in that room with a woman who had once said she'd always wanted a daughter. And an hour later, in the hospital, the young doctor said the words. I sat in the plastic chair, I looked at the pink blanket. I did not cry. Because the grief would come. I knew it would come and it would be enormous and it would wreck me. But right now there was something else occupying the space where feeling was supposed to be. Something cold and very still and quietly certain. She had made a mistake. She assumed a woman who had just lost her daughter had nothing left. She had no idea what I had left. The trial was what a small community can do when it decides to protect one of its own. Judith was charged with involuntary manslaughter. Her attorney put her kindergarten students on the stand, adults now in their 30s, who talked about how she'd shaped their lives. He put her pastor on the stand, her neighbor of 22 years. He painted a picture of a grieving grandmother, an exhausted caregiver, a tragic and terrible accident. The camera footage showed nothing definitive. Only a tired woman moving too quickly, her attorney argued. Nothing criminal. And the footage from the night Luna died was gone. The camera had been unplugged before the cloud could sink those final hours. The medical examiner testified that Luna's cause of death was hypoxic brain injury. Judith's attorney introduced the tongue-tie diagnosis and planted the suggestion that complications could have contributed. He didn't need the jury to believe it. He only needed them to wonder. The jury hung. 8 for conviction, 4 against. The D looked at the numbers, looked at the evidence gaps, and declined to retry. Judith walked out of that courthouse, surrounded by her church women, holding a handkerchief, accepting hugs from strangers. She did not look at me. Nathan held my hand on the courthouse steps and said something about healing, about time, about grace. I watched my mother-in-law move through the crowd, and I felt the thing inside me go completely still, like water turning to glass. She thought it was over. She didn't know the Wise camera had a cloud backup that operated on a rolling 60-day archive. She didn't know that 3 days before Luna died, before she thought to unplug anything, the camera had captured something. I didn't know it yet either. I was barely managing to get dressed in the mornings. But it was there, waiting in a server somewhere, patient as evidence always is. I moved into a small apartment in Brentwood 6 weeks after the trial. Nathan and I weren't separated officially, not yet. I told him I needed space, and he gave it, because he had nothing left to spend on fighting me. I played the part he needed. One evening he came over and found me sitting at the kitchen table staring at nothing, which required no acting because it was also true. He sat across from me. He reached out. I want us to get through this, he said, together. I let one tear track slowly down my face. I'd learned I could do that, some in one, just one. I want that too, I said. He exhaled like a man released. He held me and I let him, and I felt nothing except awareness of what I still needed to do. 3 weeks later, I opened the Wise Cloud archive on my laptop on my bedroom floor at 1 in the morning. I went back day by day. On the 4th day before Luna died, I found it. 3 minutes and 47 seconds. Judith at the crib, Luna crying. Judith picking her up, then setting her back down. Then reaching for the muslin swaddle cloth on the shelf, pressing it over Luna's face. Not smothering, not the violence you see in nightmares, just pressure. Enough to muffle, enough to restrict. Judith held it there, watching the wall clock for 11 seconds. Luna went quiet. Judith folded the cloth, put it back on the shelf, and left the room like nothing had happened. 11 seconds, 3 days before she died. My hands shook. I sat on that floor and let them. Then I backed up the footage to every place I could think of. An encrypted email at a library account. A thumb drive in a safety deposit box at a bank across town. I saved it 6 different ways. Then I started building. I used library computers in 3 different counties, paid cash for parking, wore a hat with the brim down. I made a file, the cloud footage, the pediatrician's notes about Luna's failure to gain weight, the photos I'd taken of the small bruises that the first trial hadn't given much weight, a timeline, and the one thing I didn't have yet, but intended to get. Judith came for coffee in late March, my idea. I told Nathan I thought I was ready to try forgiveness. He arranged it like someone diffusing something fragile, terrified I would change my mind. She sat across from me at my kitchen table. She looked older, a little smaller. But when she first came in, I caught something in her eyes. A small, quickly hidden satisfaction that told me exactly where she thought she stood. I poured the coffee. I said I just needed to understand, for my own peace. "The night it happened," I said softly. "Was she really choking like you told everyone? Or was she just crying and you just had enough?" Judith held her mug with both hands. She looked at the table for a long moment. "She was screaming," she said. "You don't know what it was like. You slept through it. I was the one getting up, night after night, and she just wouldn't." She stopped. I held her. I just needed her to stop for 1 minute. 1 minute of quiet. "Did you cover her face?" I asked, the same way I might ask if she wanted sugar. Her thumbnail moved along the seam of the mug, a long pause. "Maybe just for a second, like to quiet her, so I could think. I didn't know it would." She looked up. "I would never have meant for it to." "I know," I said. "I know you didn't mean it." I went to the bathroom and stopped the recording on my phone. I stood at the sink for a moment looking at my own face in the mirror. Then I went back out and smiled at her, small, sad, grateful. "Thank you," I said. "That helps, more than you know." She left 20 minutes later. She hugged me at the door, and I let her. I gave everything to an investigative reporter at a Nashville TV station, delivered through an anonymous email, and followed up from a payphone I'd located at a gas station 40 minutes outside the city, because I was not taking chances. I gave the cloud footage to a victim's rights attorney who agreed to review the case pro bono. Because the jury had hung, not acquitted, not a verdict, Judith could be retried with new evidence. The cloud footage was new evidence. The recording was new evidence. The attorney filed for a new trial. The reporter aired the story on a Thursday. By Friday morning, it had been picked up nationally. Nathan called 37 times. I answered once. I said, "She killed our daughter. I found the proof. I did what you wouldn't do." He said I had planned it the whole time. The whole time, I agreed. I filed for divorce the following Monday. The second trial was nothing like the first. The first trial had been about feelings, about who people believed Judith was, about the story her performance told. This trial was about a video, played on a large screen for a packed courtroom, of a woman pressing cloth over an infant's face. It was about a recording of that same woman saying she'd needed the baby to stop. It was about a medical examiner who testified without equivocation that Luna's death was hypoxic brain injury from oxygen deprivation, fully inconsistent with tongue-tie complications, consistent with sustained deliberate suffocation. Judith's new attorney was less experienced. He tried character witnesses, grief, remorse. Without the older attorney's courtroom control, it didn't land the same way. Her pastor testified and then had to sit there while the cloud footage played again. He cried, but not for Judith. Her church women had stopped calling after the footage aired. She sat at the defense table with no one in the rows behind her, except her attorney's assistant. Nathan was in the back, not as my husband. I hadn't thought of him that way in months, but as the son of the accused. Lost. He didn't look at me. I testified. I was not hysterical. I was precise, cold, careful. I told the jury what I saw in the nursery, what she said on the recording. I looked at the jury when I spoke, not at Judith, because Judith did not deserve to be looked at. The jury was out for 2 hours and 14 minutes. Guilty, second-degree murder. The judge sentenced her to 28 years without possibility of early release. Judith is 64. She will die in that prison. This is the arithmetic of what she did. They put the handcuffs on and led her out. She passed my row. One of the officers paused. I don't know why, perhaps he was kind, and she looked at me. Her face had collapsed completely. All of it gone. The warmth, the lavender, the coffee shop afternoons, the hands across the table. What was underneath was just an old woman who had been certain this moment would never come. "After everything I gave you," she said, a dry whisper, "I loved you." I leaned forward. I spoke so only she could hear me. "You assumed grief made me helpless," I said. "You thought you knew everything about what I had left. You were wrong about what kind of person I am." They pulled her away. I watched her go. The apartment is quiet now. Nathan is gone. The house by the creek sold quickly. The market was good, which felt like a small, unnecessary cruelty from the universe that something could still go smoothly. I have a new place. 1 bedroom, white walls and a small balcony, a plant on the windowsill that is still, against all odds, alive. Every Sunday I go to the cemetery in Brentwood. Luna's headstone says what it needs to say. Her name, beloved daughter. I bring 7 small pink rosebuds, 1 for each week she lived. Last Sunday the grass was damp from rain. I sat down anyway. I stayed for a long time. I told her it was over. I told her I found what I needed. I told her the person responsible is in a small room now and will remain in a small room for the rest of her life, which is still more space than she gave you, but it is everything the law had to give, and I took every piece of it. I waited for joy, or victory, or the clean, bright absence of pain. What came was something cooler than all of that. Not happiness. More like the end of a static I hadn't known I'd been hearing until it stopped. A noise that had been living inside my chest for so long I'd stopped registering it as noise, and now there was only quiet. Real quiet this time. Not the wrong kind. Not the kind that woke me at 3:47 in a dark house running down a hallway. Just air going in, coming out without catching. I laid the flowers at the base of the stone. I told Luna I loved her. I told her she was safe. I told her she would always, always be mine. Then I stood up, brushed the damp grass from my knees, and walked back down the hill. I didn't look back. I'm still learning that part, but every Sunday I get a little better at it.